Welcome to Healing Echoes. Today we have with us Reese. Reese is an Indigenous medicine woman and two-time author that uses her training and prior background in high-risk social work to empower women to eradicate trauma holistically through the Bliss Method. Hey, Reese.
Hey, Caitlin, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, thank you.
Wonderful. So I want to start. I know I kind of did a little intro, but I want you to tell us more about what you do.
Wow, I have specialized in everything that helps people release not just the emotional aspects of trauma, but also the physical aspects of trauma,
Mm,
so that they can be their true selves. And depending on when that trauma started, that might be their true selves for the first time in their life.
this is true. What got you into this line of work?
Honestly, I was born for this work.
Okay.
It's always been my passion. It's always been the goal, like that there was no higher honor in the world than getting to do my traditional training as a medicine woman. And then alongside that, even as early as my teens, when I first got my assist training, which
Mm-hmm.
is to prevent suicide for those that don't know, that is when I started running peer support groups as a teenager
Wow.
because I knew that all of my friends were queer, high risk, very suicidal people.
Mm,
And it was okay, we were all in bad situations, we all needed help. And it definitely helped shape what areas I focused in my training. So
mm-hmm.
it was like, let's really focus on the trauma recovery, the mental health. And it wasn't until later on when I was paralyzed as a teenager and had to recover from that I veered from the mental and spiritual to the physical. And from there, I had the lovely opportunity to learn how to rehab a body that
Mm.
Western medicine told me would never function properly ever again.
That last part is a theme that I've been hearing from a lot of people. So although you focus more now on the trauma aspect, would you say that all three, the mental, spiritual, and physical, all kind of tie in?
All of it. And I mean, in the traditional medicine wheel, which was more commonly used in what is now like the state and less so in Canada's Indigenous people, I add not just the mental, the spiritual, the physical, and the emotional. I
Mm-hmm.
also add in the sexual because we are all beings that when you are stressed to the max, sometimes you just need to get one out, no matter who you are, no matter how it's done, as long as you're consenting.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that. I think, a lot of it is still taboo. Even what we talk about on a regular basis to a lot of people is taboo. But
so taboo.
yeah, but I think it's really funny. The minute somebody mentions something sexual, people just immediately like, oh God, clutches pearls. Like
Right?
it's a bit
I,
ridiculous at this point.
I mean, even a friend of mine commented on one of my marketing posts about who she could take on this fabulous vacation.
Hmm.
And I said, well, maybe you take your special friend that intensely buzzes. It's a really polite way to say, well, you can do that on your own.
Yeah,
You
maybe
don't need
you need to
someone
release
else.
by yourself.
And she, knowing me, just took that playfully.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you you're a medicine woman now. You're an ex-fabulous sex worker.
yeah.
Like, yeah, of course you're gonna occasionally make sex jokes.
We're human, and it's a big part of our experience, which is why I think it's funny that it's still so taboo. I know at a local meeting that we have here for business women, our speaker last week, she's a professional. She's been a professional for a very long time, but she is not hush hush about sexuality. And so she would throw jokes in about it here and there, and you could just feel the room be like, oh God. I'm like, guys, relax.
Right? Like we all do it. Like get over the shame that
Yeah.
colonization brought to the world.
Oof. Yeah.
and like get over that religious purity complex,
Yeah, we just discussed that one too, because that was a huge thing for me
right?
to work over. So I know in the intro I mentioned the Bliss method. Tell us what exactly that is.
That is my unique methodology combining everything I learned in the front lines of social work and everything I learned in becoming an Indigenous medicine woman. And
Mm,
even like the techniques I've learned since that I've added to the repertoire,
mm,
where I, through the acronym BLISS, it's beginning to nurture, implementing the tool, supplementing them as we go along, and then continued support.
um, I like that.
It's super simple, but and especially in the Indigenous way, we start with the nurture.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how can I help you feel safe, not just where you are in life, but in your own body again?
Mm,
How can I get you to a point where your nervous system is no longer screaming?
yeah. Yeah, I
Be-
think that's really important. A lot of people don't understand anything about what their nervous system is trying to tell them.
Right? And unfortunately, I mean, even through patriarchal capitalism,
Mm.
we're forced to disconnect from all of our senses
Yep.
and just hustle till you pass out one day.
Yeah, the grind culture.
Yeah.
Love that.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic.
I was actually just talking to a friend of mine about it this morning and had posted about it this week. The reason why we hate Mondays. I mean, if we started work on a Tuesday, then we would hate Tuesdays because it's the grind culture that we hate.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of people's bodies are telling them, hey, do some work or you need to feel safe or something, and they're just not listening. I think it's not that they're not listening. I think that's why work like yours is so important, is that they don't know how to listen to it. They don't realize
Exactly.
it's even talking to them.
Like they've just lost the connection. And that's the first thing we bring back because once you know what you're feeling in through all of your senses, you can actually begin to process and work through instead of around.
Yeah, I know. I can definitely relate to that. Um, and then we mentioned that you were an author. Tell us about that.
Wow, the first book covers the first 3 years of my paralysis recovery as a teenager,
Mm,
giving like not just the this is the recovery, but also how I was treated in the world experiencing all of those things.
mm,
And the second book, it's the comeback. It's the feminist manifesto that's full of critical thinking and really analyzing not just my story, but the narrative. Because the narrative of a kid that gets sexually abused as a child
mm,
ends up in teenage sex work. The paralysis part, that's mine. Like that's not common. Um, but then the comeback in the reclaiming the sex work, switching to doming for a few years
mm,
before I got out and like finished my training and just do this now.
mhm.
Like the story is mine, but the narrative is too common.
Yeah, it is.
And I know girl in the South that is called fast got there because she wasn't sexually abused.
Wow, yeah. You said a lot.
Right? Like that one even hit me.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who grew up in the South and was judged for things, yeah, it was definitely should have been a red flag and a warning sign, but it wasn't.
Right?
Instead,
Right?
they judge. Yeah.
Like I was doing full grown sex work. I was 13.
Yeah.
I was a child,
Quite literally. I mean, I have a 13-year-old. I couldn't imagine. Yeah.
right? And if that ever happens to your 13-year-old, I'm gonna get really angry.
Is
I'm
seriously.
gonna mama bear from Canada.
Like I couldn't imagine. It's crazy when you have children and putting them, hearing these stories from other people, or even the things that I sometimes forget that I went through, and trying to put the situation like picturing it with them, and you're like, oh God, why did nobody care? Like,
Right? right?
This is
Like, why did
ridiculous.
nobody do anything?
Yeah.
And that's why like I had to really grow up on my own. And
Mm,
now I'm not biologically a parent, but I have kids that were my favorite parasites in the world that still call me mom today,
mm,
from social work. And anyone who touches a hair on their bodies, I'm
yeah.
gonna be flying to a different part of the country to deal with it.
Amen. Yep. Yeah,
Like, sorry,
it doesn't take.
mama's back.
Yeah, it does not take blood to be a mother. That is for sure. And it's something I stress a lot. I know when we've talked, you know that my oldest three aren't mine biologically, but those are my babies.
Of course they are,
Like, no, don't mess with my kids. Um,
right?
so in both of your books, you would say that, obviously all of it's your story, but some of it is something that's not quite as common, and then some, unfortunately, like you said, is way too common. Obviously, I'm gonna assume it was very empowering to write those books.
Oh, yes. I mean, the first one less so because I was at the very last 6 months of
Mm,
addiction with alcohol when I wrote the first one.
gotcha.
And it was a hard write. Oh, I cried every day
Yeah,
because at that point I was still kind of living it.
right.
I wrote it and coming up to the last months of the 3 year mark. And now it's been a decade.
Yeah.
And I look back at that book and I'm like, oh, if I was less broken and not an alcoholic, I could have written this differently.
Oh, right.
But book two, oh, all empowerment. Like I was almost on fire writing
Yeah.
that book. And because I'm the kind of author, I don't sit at a page and stare at it and tell words exist.
Mm,
I plan the whole thing in my head, almost verbatim.
mm,
And then I just sit there and I spew it out.
right.
Like editing took me 3 weeks on the second book. And, you know, had I not broken my leg, I would have had it entirely drafted in less than 2 months.
Wow. Yeah. You went in on it.
Right? And I go. I'm like, no, taking time off, business is slow, whatever.
Yeah. And then just get it all done. It's
Yeah,
interesting, with the podcast, getting to talk to so many different authors, hearing the different ways that people write. But especially with authors who are sharing part of or all of their story, it's almost like the live version of watching someone journal. Because you
mhm,
have that ability of like, well, you're sharing your story. So you have that ability of like going back and rereading, like you said,
right,
kind of looking back and going, I could have written this completely differently.
right.
But I do believe there's a reason why you wrote it when you wrote it.
Well, and especially book two, I was ready.
Yeah.
Like I had the international book number
Hmm.
and the title like almost 3 years before I sat down to draft it
Wow.
because I knew and I was just waiting for it to hit. And luckily, when I moved to Calgary,
Mhm.
I got this hit of inspiration and I was okay, well, let's go.
It's time now.
Right? Well, and even writing my third book right now, I'm writing the full methodology for the Bliss Method. Plus, it will be partially a workbook with activities that folks can do on their own safely
That's
to
nice.
begin that work. But I wasn't planning on writing it this year. It was a next year project,
Right. And then it hits you and you're like, well, I guess we're doing this now.
right? Like it just dropped in, and I'm like, okay, I know how this is gonna look,
That's awesome though. I mean, three books is quite an accomplishment. One book is an accomplishment. So
right?
you're definitely doing it. Um, so obviously we know that with all of your work with your books and with the Bliss Method, your goal is definitely to help people. But in your own words, what is your mission?
Honestly, I want to make the world a better place because in healing ourselves, we heal everyone around us.
This is true.
And
Has
I
to
know
start.
like it's cheesy as hell if you're not ready to hear it. But for those of us that get it. You understand.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't survive all that crap and at now basically unscathed because I've truly healed from all of it
Hmm.
and not pay that forward,
Yeah. I love that. Now let me do something with it. Yeah, for sure.
right? Well
Um,
then, unfortunately, so many of our mental health professionals go into it with a savior's complex and they've
mhm.
never been through anything.
Yeah.
And they wonder why they're not helpful.
Yeah.
Like
They haven't lived it.
they don't understand anyone's pain, let alone their own.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was just saying the other day, that there is a big difference between empathy and sympathy. You can feel bad for somebody, but when you've lived it, it's just different.
Right? Like I don't feel bad for you. I just want to hold your hand while you get through it. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. That tough love. You're going somewhere now. Let's go.
Yeah, like come on. Oh, that was a misstep. Come on, left, not right.
Right. I love that. For anyone wanting to start, what would be your words of encouragement?
Honestly, be really kind to yourself and start to talk to your inner child.
Mm.
Like just close your eyes and think about one day that really fucking sucked. And tell that version of you what you needed to hear on that hard day that no one else sent to you.
Mm.
You will immediately feel different
Oh yeah.
when you begin to reparent all of your pain points by even on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, that inner child work is really important. Another thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. It kind of gets glossed over in the like cap of healing. It's just
Exactly.
like heal, and it's like, okay, well, where do they start? And I think that inner child work is definitely super monumental for sure.
Well, and especially for actually releasing the pain instead of just putting a band-aid on it. Like
Mm,
all of the pills that you can take today are fantastic, but
mm,
they don't deal with the root of any problem.
yeah,
And in reality, no matter your diagnosis, if you heal the initial cause, the symptoms go away.
yeah. Yeah, I've always said that the medication definitely can help, but it's more for helping manage the symptoms, like you said. If you go in and you work at the root of the issue, because a lot of times you don't have those symptoms anymore. I live that firsthand.
It's same. Because don't get me wrong, even as a professional, there are times where we slip on the self-care
Oh
or
yeah.
something comes up and we don't have the capacity to deal with it. So
Mhm.
we have an off month.
Yeah.
And then you take a minute, and you're like, oh, oh, yeah, I should have dealt with that. Damn. Ooh. Like we're not perfect.
No, no, not at all. I was just saying that in one of my interviews that like even, coaches, therapists, whatever it might be, your title might be, we're human too. Most of us have therapists or have issues
Oh yeah.
ourselves. You really got to do that self-care, especially if you're out here trying to help people, for sure.
Right. Well, then if you were qualified and you know what you're doing, guaranteed you have someone that helps you release all the stuff, whether that, you know, a bitch and stitch with your best friend or, an actual like monthly or bi-weekly therapy session to just let it out.
Right.
We all have to do the work because you're doing the work too.
Right, that decompress.
Like, yes, I'm really good at holding space instead of taking things on, but
Mm,
there's always residue.
yeah. I think it's important that you know that. In wrapping up, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share anything that you might want to that we haven't covered, and then let people know how they can get a hold of you or everything that you do, your books, all that.
Honestly, I just want to say if you're struggling and you're at the end of your rope, reach out. Whether it's a friend, whether it's one of us professional, we don't care if we don't know you. If that message says, hey, I need to talk, we're just gonna respond.
Mm,
And for working with me, there is my website, trauma2bliss.ca. And then on Facebook, there's my no cost women's community that is called Bliss Method, BLISSESS. Very
mhm,
easy to find. My name's attached to it. You are welcome to join and talk and connect with other women that are there and not just breaking the barriers of talking about our mental health, but connecting and empowering each other, even in the threads on posts.
mm. That's awesome. And then I will make sure in the show notes that I link everything. I know people love their links. It makes it a lot easier. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I think you're incredible. I think what you're doing is incredible. So I appreciate you coming on and taking time to talk with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Caitlin.
Of course.